Well, hello everybody. This is Brother Todd with your Victory Minute. I hope you guys are having a good Memorial Day. As I'm recording this, it's a little after 11 o'clock on Memorial Day morning. We've been working here in the office on kind of a reopening plan for the Victory Church campus, and I'll get you more of that information this week. We're still flushing out some things and watching some of these COVID-19 numbers around Dallas and Kaufman County, but we'll get you all that kind of coming on this week, and got some exciting things I think planned ahead. But I wanted to talk today about it being Memorial Day. For those of you that have watched some of these Victory Minutes, you know, every now and then I bring you one of them here from my office. Normally I like being outside as much as I can get away with, but it's raining today. And even if it wasn't, I'd do today's from the inside, because right behind me in the window back there behind me is just a bunch of little knickknacks and things standing around. Most of them deal with my family, everywhere from pictures of our gang to boring bars that were in my grandfather's shop. In fact, one of them, the two behind me, one of them is one of the oldest ones Van Norman ever made, and the other one's the one I learned on, because I didn't grow up in air conditioning. I grew up working. And it's something I appreciate and I'm glad of. But also in that windowsill sets a picture. In this picture frame. The reason I'm kind of setting off sideways to you today is this picture right here. It was given to me by my son the way it is right now. I'm gonna kind of bring it up and you'll kind of see what's going on there a little bit. But the fella in that picture, and I know it's kind of hard for me to get it there. There's a medal, a service medal there beside that picture, and then there's a black and white picture of a man in a very old-timey looking military uniform. That uniform was the uniform wore by the U.S. Army before World War I. Now that picture and all is from a page in a book called Texas War Heroes, and it talks about the men from Texas that served during World War I. The picture of the man with the medal beside him is a great uncle of mine. His name was Crawford Cagle, Crofford. It's spelled a little different. You normally hear it as a last name. But my youngest grandson, his middle name is Crawford, and he's named after this man. He served in the Army, joined in 1911 before, quite a few years before America in 18 went into World War I, and he served in the Philippines, and he was part of a machine gun battalion, and I think is what they've told me, or that I've read about him. And then of course he went to World War I and fought in some different battles, fought in a very famous battle called the Battle of the Chateau Thierry. And it was around that time he was wounded by a high explosive shell in the head. And he lived for a good while, even being able to get back to the United States. They had him at Fort Sam Houston, but he died of his wounds about 10 months after he received his wounds. And he received from the French a medal called the Croix de Guerre, which it means the Cross of War, and it was a medal that they gave for enlisted men, the highest form of bravery that they gave to enlisted men that served there in France. Part of a foreign army, and it was actually even allowed to be worn on the United States uniform. The little medal that you see there is the one like men would wear to the side. There was a full big medal, and then there was the one that they would wear just as part of their normal service uniform, and that's what that medal is. That's not his. My son Mason found that for me and put with that picture and gave it to me for Christmas one year. We didn't find out about Uncle Crawford till a few years ago. Kind of got lost in the family history, and one of my other uncles found this book and found the write-up on him and those kinds of things. And we said, Brother Todd, why are you telling me that? I'm telling you that because while that is that history is practically unknown even in my own family, and it's sure unknown in the world. His mother, they say, practically mourned herself to death and died a few years later after he did, because she never really got over his loss. And while that gets forgotten and it's unknown, it's part of the fabric of society that you and I all stand on. Now, I know some of you listening to me are not Americans, But the reality is, most of us that live in any, or in fact, all of us that live in any kind of freedom in this world, there are those that have gone on before us that have ensured us those freedoms. I watch America deal with the COVID-19 response, and tragedy and difficulty always does one of two things. It reveals the good and or it reveals the bad. And I watch people fussing about some of their rights and taking them in such a trivial manner. And I think about what these that lay under all these white crosses in all these different fields from all over these different world must think about what we do with the freedoms we've been given. But each one is a little bitty part of the fabric that we all stand on. And what's important for us to do with benefits is to remember. The children of Israel, back especially when they were wandering in the wilderness and in those early days after they had left their captivity, always seemed to be moving from a time of remembering and forgetting. And it was so tragic that for them to remember, it often took tragedy. And then when things would get good, they would forget. And we as Americans live a lot the same way. In fact, a great many of us in the church do the same thing. Psalm 78, it talks, if you read through there, it kind of talks a lot about Israel's history. And if you read through it today, be looking for the words forgot and forgotten and remember and remembered. And you'll see how many times they would forget and then things would happen and they would remember, and how God was so faithful to always remember them. And one of the greatest things you'll ever do is not take for granted the benefits that God gave you. We have to remember that it was God becoming man and becoming sin for us and paying for us that gives us our life. And on Memorial Day, we don't need to forget the cross of Jesus Christ. It's the only thing Jesus ever told us to remember. He didn't tell us to take pilgrimages into the Holy Land. I was reading last night, just every now and then I'll try to kind of read about historical figures, and I've been reading quite a bit about General and President Ulysses S. Grant. And after his presidency, he was the first American president to ever tour the Holy Land in Jerusalem. And I thought, all these years and nobody had ever, could get over there then, and how God didn't call us to make a pilgrimage to here or there. He just says, remember my death. It's what we do when we take the Lord's Supper, but it's also something we need to keep in mind of. It is the price that was paid for us. And the benefits of that is our salvation. It's our hope. And as we think about, I know most of you in America that are listening to me, but wherever you stand, you have those people that have took our place and stood in our place. I'm the only, my generation of Peavies is the only one that we didn't have military service. And one of the greatest regrets of my life, me and my brother Troy talk about this a few times, is that it's one of our greatest regrets that we didn't have that opportunity to serve. Now he's a fireman and he serves in that capacity, but his son fought in Syria and Iraq, Logan, and my grandfathers on both sides of my family and those kinds of things were servicemen. My dad served in Vietnam 67, 68. In fact, he was there 2 months before I was ever born. He didn't even see me till I was right at a year old. And so these are sacrifices that are made for us, and they're things that we need to do something well with. I'm going to leave you today with a verse that I often remind myself that Jesus said, and I hope you just take it and think about it a little bit today. But Jesus said, to whom much is given, much more will be required of him. To whom much has been given. Uncle Crawford lies in a grave that in many ways bought and pays for the freedoms that I have. I don't need to live a trivial life. I used to have the biggest problem with property taxes. I hated them. I thought they was the most despicable thing anybody ever come up with. And then one day I realized, I remember saying something about my land, my place. And the Lord reminded me, well, number one, it's not yours, it's mine. And you're a steward of it. And then he kind of said, and I'll tell you something else. You didn't buy it. You didn't put any blood in the ground for that land. Men like him, men and women that we all know of, little pieces of the fabric of our society, bought and paid for us to have the opportunities that we have. We ought to be living our lives as lives of conviction and conscience You know, we've had good ideas. We don't always live up to our ideas. But you know, there's nothing wrong in really pursuing the ideas of love and peace and mercy, of a generosity towards each other and a forbearance with each other. And these days where we seem to be so divided, I pray that we would look at the benefits and blessing that the Lord Jesus gave us and unite up under his banner. And then remember that freedom is never free, and that we live having been given great opportunity. Even if we come from great difficulty, we have opportunity. And I pray that you'll seize the day, and that you'll seize this time of life, and that at the end of your days it will be said, it was good that we live, and it was good that we had our time. Men like my uncle here paid for this, and we ought to take and now give our service and give our lives and be a help and be a blessing and a strengthening. I pray that you're going to, today, you'll think about, how can I help? How can I connect to people? How can I give to people? How can I live out the reality of the Christian life and be a good citizen? You know, I think it was H.H. Hobbs said a long time ago that, you know, the duty of America, the government, towards the church is to give us a safe place to worship. And it's the duty of the church towards the government for us to produce good people to run the government. And oh, that we might be a good nation and a good people. Try to remember today, remember those in your own family that make up the fabric of your own freedom. And when you sit down, and I thank God I'm about to leave here, and if the Lord allows it, I'm going to go down to my son's house. I'm going to eat some barbecued ribs and some brisket that him and Titus have been cooking on all day. And while I do it, I'm going to sit around, I'm going to watch my grandkids play. I'm going to look at my beautiful wife. I'm going to look at my kids. And of course, I call my son-in-law and my daughter-in-law my kids too. But I'm going to look at my kids, and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to grin for a minute. And they're not going to know what I'm even doing. But I'm going to say things like, Uncle Crawford, I hope that you know I appreciate the opportunity that you gave me. And I pray that we would all be a remembering and compassionate people. May God bless you. May God keep you this Memorial Day. And I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.